Hi, welcome back to a special episode of That'll Do with Brystin Ivey. I'm your host, Brystin Ivey, and today we are going to talk about the environment because the environment is important and it gets overlooked far too much in our media. So today I am joined with fellow environmental activist Daniel Scott.
Hello.
And James McGuire.
Hello.
Now, for this podcast, we have put in extensive amounts of time in researching about the environment. And so, James, please enlighten us on what we're kind of talking about today.
Well, today we're going to talk about climate change and the way it's affecting specifically Florida, but also an overarching theme of just what we need to do in order to protect our lives and animals' lives and the environment overall.
Fantastic. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to kind of split this into three little parts. So we each researched a different aspect of what we just said. All right, so James, which aspect of this environmental situation did you look up here?
So I looked up the monetary costs, so to Florida specifically, with climate change and the flooding that would occur because of it.
Mm-hmm. What did you find there, buddy?
So what I found is, actually, it was fairly interesting. It was the fact that by, I believe, it is 2035, more than, I want to say, 64,000 homes in Florida will face flooding every other week.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah. And more than half of them are in South Florida. And by the time that 2,100, it will increase to 1 million homes, and almost 1 in every 10 homes in the state will face flooding every other week.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a huge problem. I can't believe that they can give us such an accurate reading, like 100 years in the future.
I mean, they just project scientifically and all that stuff. Because, like, climate change had actually started being researched as far back as like the 1800s.
Really?
Yeah, so there's a French scientist named Jean-Baptiste Fourier who is believed to be the first one to use the greenhouse gas analogy in 1827.
Wow.
So the idea of a greenhouse has been around for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And like other scientists, like one Swedish scientist found that, he created a mathematical model that linked CO2 to the global temperature.
It's crazy because like I just feel like so much of, specifically climate change, but really anything environmental, it's just kind of swept under the rug. Like honestly, it's just it's not put where it needs to be put, and just to know that we've had so many scientific publications since like the 1800s, like you were saying, and we're still in the same predicaments that they kind of predicted.
Yeah, and
it's crazy.
The biggest issue is policymakers like Trump sitting there getting a full climate report and being like, yeah, I don't believe it.
That's right, yeah.
Like it's tough to talk to someone when you can give them all the facts and they're just like, but what if?
It's like, but what if, yeah. So climate change is essentially going to be drowning Florida homes for the next 100 years. That is terrifying.
It is ridiculous. Like, I want to say a conservative estimate that I found, like one of the most conservative estimates I found when I was doing my research, because there was some that was like, it could rise by 15 feet, but the conservative one is 6 feet.
6 feet.
That the sea level would rise.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the lowest I had found. And what they said basically was that when that happens, we're going to lose, I want to say, when it reaches the end of the century, it's going to be like $1.07 trillion.
Oh, man.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah,
That is a good amount of money. Jeez.
Yeah. And the craziest part is that right now they're saying that if we could, get all of our stuff together and at least follow the Paris Climate Agreement and like the reduction standards and all of that, we could save about 93% of homes at risk in the state of Florida.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we actually have a solution, like in front of our eyes.
Yeah.
But will we do it?
That's the question. And you said 6 feet, right, to begin with?
Yeah, 6 feet is one of the conservative estimates I found for the end of the century, that the sea level would rise.
So,
I get to live.
yes.
James does.
For anyone listening.
Sorry about you, buddy.
No, it's okay. I am the resident short man in the group, and I am sitting here at a solid 5'9". And
6'1", I can get my nose up.
yeah,
6'5".
so you guys, it's pretty much one of you. That is how much it's going to rise. That is an insane amount of
And you
water.
gotta think about the fact that it's along the whole coast.
Yeah, right. Did it tell you where exactly like the water line would go to? Like what would be safe in Florida? Or would Florida just totally be under at a
Pretty
certain
much
point?
everything on the coast is
Just go.
because I found there was a statement that said if you split Florida down the middle by split Florida by how many people live right near the coast and how many people don't, it's split right down the middle. So half of everybody lives in the state of Florida lives on the coast.
Oh, dude, I believe it. I mean, just living here, you kind of get a feel of that.
I think Miami is out trying to. They made a fund where they're going to try and prepare, and their idea is, and it's going to take $200 million to fight the rising titles, and then like in the Keys, they found that it would cost for 1 mile of road in the Keys to be raised a mile.
Right.
It would be half a million.
Man, we are dropping some serious money bombs here. That is insane.
Well, it's just interesting to think about, because like when you hear about climate change, like I'll be honest, I was sitting there and I was just like, yeah, my kids will take care of it.
The next generation will handle that, yeah.
And then I'm sitting over here like, oh, this is 15 years.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
man.
I'm still gonna be around for that.
And it's also, man, like that's been the theme, like for over these hundreds of years. It's like, oh, the next guys will get it. Oh, the next guys will do it. And it's like, you know, it's almost like our calling to kind of sit here and be like, well, you know, if grandma's house had to drown, I don't want my house to drown in like 50 years. So maybe I'll try.
Hurricane Michael that happened this year is the strongest hurricane to hit in decades.
Right.
Scientists were saying that it caught everybody by surprise because it turned from a tropical storm to a full-on hurricane in like 2 days.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back on it. I remember the tropical storm, and the next thing I know was hurricane.
Yeah, it was just kind of, there was no transition. Like you just knew it from one point to the next.
And it only took 2 days to strengthen, and that was one of the strongest to hit the continental U.S. in decades.
That's terrifying.
And at this point, it's believed that the storm is just gonna get stronger every year.
Really? I did not know that. That's just like a held belief.
Yeah, like because the Gulf is up by like 3.6 degrees over its average temperature this year.
Jeez.
So it's just gonna keep. If there's more or less stronger storms, like the strongest storms are gonna be stronger. So we might have to make a new category called the 6.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And you
That
just
is
gotta think about
mind-blowing.
The homes that get destroyed and.
Well, yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned Panama because like Florida gets a large amount of its like state revenue from tourism, and so if all of our beaches are underwater,
Okay.
I mean that's going to be a huge issue financially for the entire state of Florida.
And then also you got to think about. I believe the state of Florida has about 7,000 commercial properties that'll be at risk, along with the 64 homes in 2045. So all those properties are just being wiped out. So we're losing billions, if not trillions, of dollars.
Those are expensive homes too. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
They're nice. They're nice places. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous. And then also it's the fact that apparently they estimate that to help the state of Florida once it gets to that point, it costs about 1/10 of the U.S. economy.
Oh man. Yeah. I don't really have that just sitting in my pocket right now. It might be time to work on some things.
Yeah, it's a whole lot of doom and gloom, but all it is we just need to talk to policymakers and lawmakers and be like, hey, we want to get this fixed.
Oh yeah, like there's hope. We're not on a track to destruction.
Like there's a way to turn it back. The window's small, but there is a way for us to turn it back now before we lose everything.
And we need to now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna switch gears here a little bit, and we've kind of focused a lot on the human aspect of flooding in Florida, but I would like to turn our attention to something that I feel like is very overlooked, and I don't think it should be that way. I'm talking about animal habitats
So the whales.
all across Florida. Yes, we're saving the
Saving the
whales.
whales, okay.
We are. If we bring them to Florida, we will save them because they will be safe. No, but flooding, especially with avian communities, I found out is huge. because what happens is migratory birds, they cross the Gulf of Mexico during the hurricane season, and so hurricanes bring a lot of flooding when they come into the Gulf. And so birds are smart enough to wait for favorable winds and weather, but if the storm begins and they become trapped, they actually they might not have enough fuel reserves to survive flying into the headwinds. So what happens is it completely screws up birds' migratory patterns, and it separates flocks or murders or whichever group of bird we're talking about. It really does affect most of them. And then, as you know, birds nest in trees, they nest in high areas, but flooding actually does mess with their locales. So like if they find an area that isn't as high as they want it to be, they'll actually move on.
Oh, so they have a standard of
height. Yeah, like birds
birds
legitimately have a standard of height, some species. And so if your tree is 12 feet off of the ground, but it's only 6 feet out of the water, they're not going to build a nest there. Especially if the current is going a certain direction or a certain speed. They're very peculiar animals, or not peculiar, but very particular animals, which I never knew. When birds leave, they affect the entire ecosystem. It's like the different trophic levels, and so once you remove one animal from that, it's gone. Like the whole thing gets thrown out of whack. So I looked to see if maybe there was some kind of like organization or industry devoted to like misplaced animals, like in that regard, like natural disasters. And the only ones I can really find are ones that are like post-human disaster, like the BP oil spill. So like we kind of take responsibility for our actions, and we don't take responsibility for nature's actions, which in this particular regard are still our fault.
Yeah.
Definitely what I think, the change that I would want to see is that we have some kind of industry or some kind of development with a bigger organization that focuses on reintroducing animals to certain spots that have been completely decimated by floods.
Yeah. Well, it's just interesting because I've never really thought about the birds.
Right? Yeah. Because birds fly. Like, why would it be a problem?
I can add to that. There is a bird in the Everglades that is called the Cape Sable seaside sparrow. And because of flooding, they are potentially going extinct. Because
Really?
they do not have places to land to build nests.
Do they build it on the ground?
No, I mean, there are no places to land on the Everglades, which I'll get into later.
Got you. That's another thing too, is like some like pigeons and I think it's like pigeons, cardinals, and I mean geese obviously, but there are like some other like bigger. Yeah, I mean most of their food comes from the ground. They hunt animals on the ground and they're fed by people.
Yeah.
And so they completely lose not necessarily housing, but like a source of food. Like I'm pretty sure in some mating rituals you do it on the ground.
Yeah.
So, I mean, where are you gonna
We've
go?
all seen ducks in parks.
We've all seen ducks in parks, or even peacocks when they fly out where are they gonna go? There's actually a growing population that is only in Florida. So that would be a huge problem for peacocks.
Tell me I can find a wild gathering of peacocks.
Yes.
You can. They are colorful male peafowl, in case you were wondering. Yes, but I mean other animals too. I don't know if you guys have ever kind of worried about squirrels in these situations.
Oh yeah.
But I mean a lot of ground mammals just get wiped out. Honestly.
Yeah.
There's nothing they get stuck in a tree or they get stuck in a specific location, and if they can't wait it out, man.
It's funny even with squirrels. One of those what was the hurricane or I want to say sophomore year. Is that Irma?
Hermine.
Hermine
Was Hermine the sophomore?
Was sophomore
Okay,
year.
so
That one. I remember walking because I was in the dorms and there was a tree that was right next to our window. And it was there because the storm happened like a month in. So it was standing there and we all look over and we see the tree fall. The next day I walk outside and I just see a baby squirrel on the ground.
no.
Yes, like there's just a baby squirrel on the ground dead because the tree had been knocked over and had fallen out of its own tree. I was just like, That is sad.
That's
and
awful.
That's gonna happen. More trees are gonna start falling.
Mm-hmm.
Like Tallahassee, for example, not.
Well, you saw how many trees fell in the last
Yeah.
hurricane.
Oh yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
like that's a whole nother aspect of it. Is the floods are they're creating like more problems in the environment
Yeah.
because they're like ruining that much water, like ruins soil and like can take the whole top layer with it. So then you're left with like a layer of soil that like can't grow anything yet. Like certain plants and certain plants need that topsoil to grow,
Well,
and without it you lose specific species.
things like agriculture will be affected because of the fact that like the heat in the state of Florida at least will decrease yields on corn, sugar, peanuts, cotton. And the only way to fix that would be water, and we would need to get more water.
Floods ruin agriculture. Like entire fields of crops just get completely wiped, and actually that goes back to the animals.
Horses drown.
Horses drown. Yeah, if you leave livestock or like you're improper, I guess like they have a list of like proper and improper animals when it comes to like a barnyard to leave in certain situations. And if you leave improper animals in a flood warning or a flood watch, like there is a huge chance you could just you just lose that livestock. Like that's just a huge animal rights issue anyway. Where are they gonna go? Like you leave, but it's kind of like what do you leave behind?
Yeah.
So having some kind of group around that, I think could really help that issue. But yeah, so I think we've covered really all of Florida.
My turn?
Yeah, Daniel, you have like a
Well,
more specified.
Like my colleague Brystin, focused on flooding and the broader scope of state of Florida. I myself went towards a mainly narrow scope in the Florida Everglades. And the Florida Everglades, as you well know, is a very famous wildlife preserve. It's 1.5 million acres.
Of course.
Very, very big. Probably Florida's most famous.
One could argue.
One could argue that. And well, due to flooding from torrential rains and tropical storms, and that's over the past 4 years, there's been a lot of flooding, and to the point, like I said earlier, that there is nowhere to land in many spots of the Everglades.
For birds and other animals, just in general.
No dry land. There's it's all water. That's of course killing trees because there's too much water is a bad thing. But there's so much water that also you have in Native American tribes where they have rituals and like the Seminole Miccosukee members, their ceremonial and educational purposes for those islands have been underwater for about 5 months as of, I believe, last year around November.
Really?
They were underwater for 5 months.
5 months out of the year.
5 months, yeah, from June to November, they were underwater.
It's a long time to hold your breath.
They probably didn't become unflooded until about January of last year.
How did that?
This year, January of this year.
How did that happen? Was that like a man-made?
What we're doing is we're pumping all of that out. We're trying to remove it all. We have floodgates. We're pumping a lot of it into the ocean. However, when I researched, I found out there was a lot of problems that came with that. Well, one problem is where do you dump the water?
Right.
And officials wanted to do it down in the south part of the Everglades where there was less water and more dry. However, when you pump water down south, you're pumping it in the opposite direction that the water is flowing. And that leads to a whole host of other problems that have to get maintained. And when it comes to the bird situation, like the sparrow that I said, they were actually around November. The officials wanted to open up more gates for dumping more water in. However, that federal officials, because the sparrows are protected species, would not allow any more dumping of water into that area. And January was their nesting period. They wanted those birds to come in and nest and get out of there. That's also becoming a major problem because commissioners of Florida fish culture and all that stuff want the water to be pumped right then and there because it's flowing so much there might not be anything left. Ron Bergeron, Commissioner of Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, said if they don't pull the trigger right then and there might not be nothing left to save. So there's a major problem. And then you have to deal with the other problems as well, like when you dump water from one area to another area, it brings stuff with it that's not in that environment. So you have algae, you have bacteria, you have other things that should not be in that area.
So we're essentially introducing invasive species.
This could have been a major factor in the current algae problem that we have right now. That's an epidemic for Florida. It could have very well have become, at least partly, because of this dumping of water. I mean, they're pumping out billions of gallons from this area in the Everglades to the western part of the Everglades to the southern, and then the Ockalochnee Bay and the Okeechobee and those kind of areas. In October of last year, record rains, I believe, happened that sent, water levels soaring across the farmland south of Lake Okeechobee. So they couldn't really wait for January for the nesting period. So they had to open up the 2 floodgates that the city officials and federal officials were not allowing opened. They had to open them up. And this, within 3 days, what remained of dry land and for sparrow nesting was gone. So in the Okeechobee area, there is no place for that sparrow to nest and reproduce, and they're close to extinction already. And
really?
So it's not looking good for the sparrow, essentially. The really big problem with this is you don't know where to dump the water. There's many areas, that comes with many problems. There's no real surefire solution of where to put this water. A lot of people, like the Audubon Florida Research Director, Jerry Lawrence, doesn't believe they're dumping it in the right places. They understand the emergency need because there's so much rain. You have to put it somewhere, because if we don't put that water somewhere and let it stay there, the wetlands will be gone. The Everglades will be essentially wiped out. But there's a lot of different opinions of where to
go. Yeah.
To save the Everglades, they had to make some sacrifices, but they got it down.
Sometimes you have to, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's interesting to think about the fact that people say that climate change won't affect us in this generation or something along those, or it's something that can be put off to the end, but we're already feeling the effects here in Florida. We as a people, especially in the state of Florida, need to come together and just go to our policymakers, go to government officials, talk to our congressmen, our local government, all that, and just let them know that we want solutions, we want a change.
Express our rights as citizens to enact change. Honestly, kind of feels like we're the climate guinea pig.
Yeah.
And at least the California's on fire, but aside from that, like we are, when it comes to flooding, when it comes to our specific research, I mean, we are like ground zero for flooding, and something needs to be done.
We're one of the most at-risk areas in the world because of climate change. And who knows, the state could be gone at some point in the future from what projections show. The state could be just wiped out.
Any projection where we're completely wiped out.
And
just
completely underwater is not
You're right, it's not good.
it's not good.
All right, well, guys, I think we came up with a lot of good points today.
Absolutely.
I think we definitely mentioned some things that maybe not a lot of people know, that maybe aren't at the forefront of everybody's mind. And I think maybe they should be.
Yep.
And this might be a pull in that direction. So thanks, everybody, for listening. Really appreciate it. Yeah, if there's anything you can do to change the environment in your area. Yeah, I am really enthusiastic of the environment.
You can't go with it.
Get out there, change the environment.
Go get her over there.
Yeah,
Save the whales.
don't just make a podcast and talk about it. Go out and do it. Go out and be the change. Be the change you want to see.